too high. He said, they've ruined you. He said, here, come on, let's go for a pint. And I went, what? And that was all I'd heard of it. I was going, oh, Jesus, everybody's going to hate it.
Few voices in rock are as unmistakable or as unstoppable as Brian Johnson's.
I got 9 lives, cat's eyes, abusing every woman, every woman, well, yes, I'm
With his raspy howl and working-class swagger, he didn't just front a band, he helped rebuild it from the ashes. From the shipyards of northeast England to the stages of sold-out stadiums, Johnson's story is one of grit, graft, and unexpected glory. This is the journey of the man who stepped into the biggest boots in rock and filled them with thunder, the rise, fall, and roar of AC/DC's indomitable frontman. Born Brian Francis Johnson on October 5, 1947, in Dunston, County Durham, his early life was firmly rooted in the working-class heartland of industrial Britain. His father, Alan, was a former coal miner and a disciplinarian sergeant major in the Durham Light Infantry, while his mother, Esther, hailed from Italy, bringing a different cultural flavour to the household. It was a typical upbringing for the time, far removed from the glitz and glamour of rock stardom. Music was an early, if informal, presence. Young Brian sang with the Scouts and lent his voice to the local church choir, an early indication of a vocal talent that would one day shake stadiums. He also spent time in the Territorial Army, a commitment that speaks to a certain groundedness and discipline that would remain with him throughout his life.
That's where you make the big bucks. You get £8 for every parachute jump you do. I went, well, I'll give it a shot. Just a bit of light bruising, that kind of fucking hurt too much. But when I was an aeroplane, stand up, come to the door, and I was jumping out of aeroplanes. And I never landed at one in my life. I'd never been on an aeroplane.
These were the formative years, before the roar of amplifiers and the adulation of millions became his daily reality. His musical journey truly began in the local club scene, a proving ground for countless British musicians. He cut his teeth with bands like the Gobi Desert Canoe Club and a lesser-known project called Fresh, honing his stage presence and vocal delivery in smoky venues. These were the lean years, the apprenticeship every aspiring musician cures, filled with late nights and long drives. From 1970, he joined the Jasper Hart Band, a cabaret outfit that saw him performing a diverse range of material, from show tunes to soft rock and pop. It was a far cry from the raw power of AC/DC, but it provided invaluable experience in entertaining an audience. It was in 1971 that Brian formed Jordi, a band that would give him his first real taste of success. With Jordi, he started to craft the powerful, gravelly vocal style that would become his trademark. They managed to achieve a couple of top 40 hits in the United Kingdom, notably with tracks like All Because of You, which reached number 6 in the charts, and Can You Do It? These were exciting times, seeing their names in the charts and performing on television shows. He even released a solo single, I Can't Forget You Now, while still with Jordi in 1976. Speaking to Classic Rock magazine in 2019, Johnson reflected on those early days. We were just having a good time, really. We never thought about where it would lead. We just wanted to play music and entertain people.
So when all the boys got together, we named the band Jordi because of that fact, to tell people that where we came from.
You like the name?
Yeah.
However, by the late 1970s, the momentum for Jordi had waned, and the band eventually dissolved. Brian, ever the pragmatist, decided it was time for a change. He semi-retired from the music business and, with typical northern industriousness, opened an auto body repair shop. He was building a solid, sensible life, far from the unpredictable nature of the music industry. Little did he know, destiny was about to knock, and it would knock very loudly indeed. In 1980, the rock world was in shock. AC/DC, one of the fastest rising and most electrifying bands on the planet, had suffered an unimaginable tragedy. Their charismatic and much-loved frontman, Bon Scott, had passed away on February the 19th.
Singer of the rock group AC/DC was found dead last night in a parked car in South London. Scotland Yard said the body of 30-year-old Bon Scott was discovered by a friend who had left him in the car hours earlier to sober up after a day's drinking.
The future of the band hung precariously in the balance. Many believed it was the end. How could they possibly replace such a unique and vital presence? What many didn't know at the time was that Bon Scott himself had unknowingly provided a crucial clue. The call came, and Brian, who was happily running his body shop, initially had reservations. He was older, 32 years old, and the prospect of re-entering the tumultuous world of rock and roll was a big one.
I played in a band at night time. I'd already been quite successful with a little band called Jordi. We'd had 2 or 3 minor hits, and I was more broke than when I joined. So I had to start earning some money to pay the mortgage. First of all, there was a fan from Cleveland, to my eternal debt, I thank, Mutt Langer, who kept saying, listen, you got Mutt Lang, he said, you got to try this guy. And Bon Scott himself unwittingly told the boys, he said, of all the rock singers I've seen in England, there's this kid called Brian Johnson. I got a phone call one day, right out of the blue, and it said, you are Brian Johnson, this is you? And I went, who are you? What do you want? She said, you must come to London and sing with a group. And I said, which group?
You invited to an audition?
Yeah, she wouldn't tell me. And I said, well, I'm not coming down. And just after that call, 30 minutes later, I got a call from a guy. And he says, Brian, you remember me? And I said, sure. He said, well, I'm doing jingles now. Would you sing on a Hoover advert? And I said, how much? And he said, 350 quid. He said, with residuals. And I said, I'll come down. And I went down and I phoned up the boys. I said, I'll come down and do it on the same day. So I went in and did this. The new high-powered mover from Hoover. It's a beautiful mover. There's £350. Thank you very much.
Is that right? The new high-powered compact from Hoover. It's a beautiful mover.
And then from there, I remember coming out the studio and just saying, gosh, it's getting late. I have to get back to Newcastle, which is a 5-6 hour drive in there. Yeah. Or do I walk across that street? But I made a fateful decision that evening. I just said, bollocks, I'm going to walk across the street. And I did.
Thank goodness.
And I opened the door, and I'll never forget Malcolm, God bless his cotton socks, came over and he gave us a bottle of Newcastle Brown Ale.
Uh-huh.
He said, there you go, me son. I know you like that. I said, mate, I could kill this. I remember I sang Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits, and they had to learn it. Like, what the hell? But it was wonderful. I said, I like that song.
Nutbush City Limits?
Yeah. And Mal says, yeah, I think I can do that, mate. I'll just give it a little shotty there, you know. And I played a few chords, you know. Both them and me were a little bit unsure. You know, if I had done an AC/DC song first, they would have been just sort of, and I would have been going, oh my God. And this way it was fun. And we had a laugh. And then, I looked around and there was a couple of raised eyebrows, because it's a great rock and roll song, Nutbush City Limits. And the guys were actually getting the groove and all of that, and we're just chunking away. And then we did Whole Lot of Rosie second. What happened was I said, thanks very much, lads, for the sing. I said, wait till I get back to my band, they're not going to believe I sang with you guys. But thanks very much. And they went, where you going? I said, I got to get home, mate. I got to open the shop up in the morning.
Within days, on the 1st of April 1980, AC/DC officially announced Brian Johnson as their new lead vocalist. It was a swift decision, driven by a gut feeling that this was the right man to carry the torch. The weight of expectation was immense, but Brian was ready. There was no time to waste. Within days of joining, Brian was whisked away to the Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas to begin recording the band's next album. The pressure was unimaginable. Not only was he replacing an iconic and much-loved frontman, but he was also stepping into a band still reeling from loss. The album had to be a triumph, a statement of defiance in the face of adversity.
and they're going to find out after a couple of days that I'm just not that good. And, you know, and Malcolm came up to us, I think, on the second day, and he said, "Can you write lyrics?" And I said, "I'll give it a shot." And he said, "Well, here you go." And he gave us a cassette, because there were these horrible little rooms with a hand basin, a bed, and a little desk, and that was it. And a yellow legal pad and a pen. And he said, "There you go." And he put it there, and I just heard this riff, and I just wrote. You know, I was a car fanatic then as well, so the first line I wrote down was, "She was a fast machine, she kept her motor clean." You know, that was the first thing I could come up with. Best damn woman I ever seen. So, and it just went on from there. We're only there 6 weeks, Dan. I mean, it belies belief that we actually did this album, this monster album, in 6 weeks, but the budget was in such a way that we really couldn't afford to hang around.
The result was Back in Black, released in July 1980. It was more than just an album, it was a phenomenon. From the opening toll of the bell in Hell's Bells to the searing riffs of Back in Black and You Shook Me All Night Long, the album was a raw, powerful, and utterly triumphant return. Brian's vocals were a revelation, gravelly, powerful, and perfectly suited to the band's hard-hitting sound. He brought his own distinct personality to the songs, respecting Bond's legacy while forging his own path. But not everyone was convinced when they first heard the album.
I phoned one of the boys from the band I was in, Dick Rutham, who was a guitarist, and Jordi too, and I said, "Jordi, better kind of calm down. I've got this new album that we did. It's called, you know, the Back in Black one." He went, "Oh, right." He said, "Is that nonsense not finished yet?" He said, "Come on, we've got to get back together again." Because, you know, I'd
With
left
his
this
old- with
lovely
your old band, yeah.
Yeah, my old band. And I felt terrible because, you know, we were very popular in Newcastle. And so I took it down to him. And he went, "Well, it's a bit of a cheapskate cut." And he put it on, and it was Hell's Bells was the first thing. And he went on, and I started singing, and he went, "No, no, 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 no." He said, "It's too high, man. Too high." He said, "They've ruined you." He said, "Here, come on, let's go for a pint." And I went, "What?" And that was all I'd heard of it. I was going, "Oh, Jesus, everybody's going to hate it."
In his autobiography, Brian recalls the recording sessions as intense, but incredibly productive. "It was full on from day one," he wrote. "We were working constantly, writing, recording. But there was a real energy, a feeling that we were doing something special." Back in Black went on to become one of the best-selling albums of all time, selling an estimated 50 million copies worldwide. It transformed AC/DC into a global superpower, cementing their place in rock history. It was a monumental achievement, a testament to the band's resilience and Brian's seamless integration. He had not just filled Bond's shoes, he had carved out his own indelible mark.